Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. China has warned that the United Kingdom is opening itself up to serious consequences if it follows through on a plan to offer refuge and a path to citizenship for Hong Kong citizens should China implement a restrictive national security law. China believes that the people of Hong Kong who were born there are Chinese nationals. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson recently outlined a proposal saying that if necessary, Britain will allow Hong Kong residents who hold British national overseas passports to come to the UK. Meanwhile, geopolitics combined with domestic politics are making Huawei's chances of supplying 5G equipment in the UK appear slimmer by the day. Local media reported that officials have been ordered to draw up plans to phase out the Chinese company's involvement in UK 5G networks by 2023. As such, the UK government is looking to other companies that might help fill the gap. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the tensions between the UK and China. Joining me on the program today are Navtej Sarna, former ambassador, Elizabeth Braw, Senior Research Fellow, Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, and Sheetal Sharma, Assistant Professor, Center for European Studies, JNU. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. All right, Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. Let's get your thoughts on the tensions between the UK and China.
Well, I think these are part of what is happening all over the world. There is a changing consensus on China, and there are several factors here. One, at a level which is worldwide, and second, which are UK specific. I think a worldwide factor is that there is a lot of unhappiness at the way China has handled the coronavirus pandemic, the lack of transparency, and other related issues. And added to that is, and the UK particularly, you see there have been over 50,000 deaths in the UK from coronavirus. So certainly this is a major factor. The second factor remains that on Hong Kong, the UK has a special situation. Since post 97, there is a kind of residual feeling that perhaps justice was not done to the Hong Kong citizens. And part of the toughening attitude that we see of China all around the world is the new security law that is being implemented in Hong Kong, which for all practical purposes will bring it in line with the rest of China, will announce the end of the two systems, one country paradigm that was existing. So I think all this put together puts a certain amount of pressure on the United Kingdom to take a strong stand, and they have. It's not very clear as to whether it's going to be 300,000 or 3 million. There were two different statements, but the last one was by the Prime Minister saying 3 million, which includes all those who are not only have the British overseas national passport, but are entitled to, which would be a major blow to Hong Kong, taking away 3 million. It's also not so easy for the UK, given that immigration was such a big issue on the Brexit debate, to be accepting 3 million other citizens. So I think we'll have to see how far this goes. We'll have to see when and if the security law is implemented, and we'll have to see how far the UK goes. Of course, as you mentioned, there are related issues like the Huawei investment and other matters. But what you are seeing today is a more aggressive China in several parts of the world, and differing reactions from different countries. So this is one aspect of this overall development that is taking place.
Okay, all right. Elizabeth Braw, so what is the sense on the ground, really? There is a big anti-China sentiment if you look at the United States. Is it the same in the UK as well? And that's why we're seeing so much of political mileage as well.
Well, it's interesting to see how the sentiments or the attitudes towards China have shifted since the coronavirus crisis broke out. And as the ambassador mentioned, it's really before and after. Before coronavirus, many countries, many governments, Western governments were hoping maybe against a better judgment, that China could be just another country, maybe a little bit different from us in the way it conducts domestic policies, but one that could be brought into line to work with us in a globalized economy. And it has turned out that that was just too naive. And I think that's something that the UK government has discovered, and other Western governments as well, including Germany and smaller European countries. So this is all part of that change. And even Italy, if I may add, Italy, which used to be seen as China's best bet in Europe, even the Italians have woken up to the fact that maybe the Chinese aren't such good friends, even though the Chinese sent them supplies during the coronavirus crisis when no other country sent them anything. Those were commercial supplies or commercial deals rather than aid from China, and sometimes it turned out they were defective anyway. So it is a radical change. I wouldn't say a complete change, but a radical change in how governments, and if I may add, ordinary citizens see China, because of course we are all watching this and discovering that maybe it's safer not to do business with China.
Okay, all right, Sheetal Sharma. So what has prompted the UK to take on China at this point in time?
Frank, we have to look into the global dynamics which has been unfolding since pandemic in the last 4 or 5 months, I would say, and not just 2-3 months of lockdown in this period. Now, there are 2-3 ways to look at it, because at this point of time, suddenly it seems to be China on one side and rest of the world on the other side. Now, there are 2-3 ways I interpret this situation. One is from the Chinese perspective. Number one is that China at this point of time may have won a small battle, but the war is far from over. So one is that China is somehow trying to cash upon or take advantage of the vulnerabilities of the small, medium and big states, economic, political, their domestic issues, and at the same time trying to impress itself as an economic giant and trying to dictate global order in the near future. Number two, this can also be perceived as a strategy to shift focus or attention of the needle of suspicion which goes to China every time whenever we talk about the origin of virus. So what is the possible game plan? The possible game plan could be that you engage these smaller nations or the medium powers into a kind of muscle flexing or a subtle or any other kind of pressure in which they tone themselves down and try to ally with China rather than aligning with the Western powers, which have been trying to show that China is behind the entire pandemic and virus spread from there. Number three, how do we look at it from the perspective of the Western powers? For a long period of time, what UK has done, UK has been reflecting or is a shadow of Washington's China policy, because UK is a close ally to US, but at the same time, UK has to balance its economic relations with China. Now, in the coming months, what are we going to see? In the coming months, we are going to see realism at its best. The reason being that all other isms, I would say liberalism, capitalism, idealism, or any other kind of philosophy is going to be subsumed under the rational hardcore principles of realism. And this is where UK has to do a balancing act. It's lying between China and US, not just geographically, but at the same time, even in terms of the balance of power between the two. Now, UK faces a particular situation in which it was already in the middle of a crisis which was caused because of Brexit. Large number of deals are going to be signed unilaterally or multilaterally or at bilateral level with the European Union. The divorce was almost done. Now what? UK faces a crisis. At this point of time, how UK is going to balance? So UK is engaging in a balancing diplomacy. But at another level, the fourth way of perceiving this crisis could be that UK is just one small element in the entire dynamics of global chessboard, where practically all the Western powers, I would not say just Western, all the nations which have been wary of Chinese acts, either military expansionism or political hegemony, or say, for example, checkbook diplomacy through which it has been trying to take number of nations under its control. So at this point of time, somewhere they have found an ostensible reason to corner China. So these can be 4 or 5 ways in which this entire scenario is unfolding. And then these could be used as a game or a pressure tactics in order to bring them on line. So there are many facets of reality, Frank. We have to really see that what dynamics is playing at what level. But truly, next few months and the emerging global order is certainly going to see that what China was imagining, it has dented its image far more, as compared to gaining economic strength.
All right, then taking the discussion forward, Ambassador, talking about China, the Chinese too have said that there is going to be serious consequences if the UK follows through with its plan to give citizens of Hong Kong refuge in the UK. So what are the repercussions likely to be, and is the UK ready for it? As pointed out by Sheetal Sharma, there are several issues that the political class in the UK already has to deal with or has been dealing with over the last couple of years.
Well, I think as far as the UK is concerned, clearly this is a choice that they have made to take a tough stand. And I suppose if there are consequences, the UK would have expected these consequences and would be prepared to face them. I think there are certain advantages too for the United Kingdom in this. And I think one big advantage is that they are very worried about getting the US-UK trade deal through quickly. So this will put them more in line with President Trump's view of China than what the UK view of China was, say, in 2015 when President Xi made a state visit during Cameron's time. And, there was tremendous belief in China as a rising benevolent power, and Osborne's visit to China and the building up of China. So I think they've now put their eggs, let us say, in Trump's basket more than in China. Then also this is a certain coalescing of British politics. I mean, there are people who believe in the liberal international order, which China is threatening. There are people who believe that China is conducting human rights excesses, particularly in Xinjiang. So all these people, and there are people who are worried about China investing too heavily into UK establishments and factories and corporates and taking away the technology. So all these forces are now aligning. So obviously these are the plus points. And as far as the Chinese are concerned, they are obviously not going to take a threat like this from the UK lying down. China is not playing the victim around the world, despite the criticism on coronavirus. They are coming out showing that we have recovered. Our economy is the first off the block, and look at where the United States is. They are moving to take world leadership on several issues, particularly in multilateral organizations. They're putting into place new administrative structures in the South China Sea. They are changing their language on Taiwan, which is becoming a more aggressive language. So clearly, they're not going to take this threat from Boris Johnson lying down and lose 3 million of their people and more qualified and professional people who are there in Hong Kong. So I think if this does go into a full-time confrontation, I think it will be a real chill for UK-China relations for a while to come.
Absolutely. And, Elizabeth Braw, talking about Hong Kong and this offer of citizenship, how is it likely to pan out really in the UK? And what are the political implications for Boris Johnson and his cabinet?
Well, it's a very paradoxical situation because, as you know, we have left the European Union and we'll leave the single market at the end of the year. And part of the reason the UK wanted to leave the European Union was that it didn't like its freedom of movement for EU citizens. Many Brexit voters were concerned about the level of immigration. And so here we have this completely paradoxical situation that the UK has left the European Union, but may end up with 3 million Hong Kong resident citizens. And I think it's the right thing to do, but it's still very paradoxical. And it stands. We have to see whether all 3 million end up accepting the offer. But still, it is a very significant number. And I think it's part of, frankly, the chaos that's surrounding the UK's departure from the European Union, because we have to remember the UK also doesn't have a lot of clout now with China, because it's completely alone. Where when we were a member of the European Union, we could count on support from the EU. Now there is none of that. The UK is alone. China will continue to threaten and coerce, which is something it does with many other countries, many other Western countries, but the UK will be completely exposed to those threats and that coercion.
Absolutely. That having been said, Sheetal Sharma, what options does the UK have going forward?
Frank, it has been really tough time for the country. I would say that as if the other crises were not enough, that even Corona came, and then now chill between UK and China. Now, what options UK have? Number one is that already the Brexit happened on the basis of, some amount of emotional sentiment being stoked among people about migrants taking over their jobs and all that. But then we have to have a look at a deep understanding of the domestic situations which are going to unfold in the coming years. Once again, the deal which has been or which has to be signed with the EU is going to be a kind of softer deal, where much of it's going to remain within the territory of the European Union only. So how are we going to deal with it? Yes, the other panelist is right, although of course we can't say that all the 3 million are going to accept the offer. But if in case there is some kind of instability that happens in Hong Kong because of, say, use of political or repressive state apparatus, then we'll certainly see an influx of at least even a 50% of people from there. What would be the likely consequences? One is, the advantage would be that, yes, UK is aging. So once again, which is a general problem with the entire European countries, the demographic deficit, where they need labor to come and work for them. At least Hong Kong will have a good set of professionals, those who are educated and skilled. They can come and take over jobs. But then what is going to be the implication upon the unemployment rate of the natives? That we have to see. Number two, that in the process, UK has to sign number of economic deals and foreign trade agreements with a large number of countries, because now it's going to be bilateral between individual member states of the European Union as well as the world powers. And number three, how is it going to continue with China? And this is where I'll say again that hardcore realism is going to dictate how UK is going to deal with China, because of the economic interest. UK in any case is going to face a economic slowdown because of the divorce deal. But at the same point, how it keeps China into the loop, and that is why it's a balancing act. What is caution here is that UK must not act as somebody on the pretext of US diplomacy towards China. So US might use UK to a certain extent in order to pressurize China for the kind of deeds it has been doing, because the US-China axis is operating on different dynamics as compared to UK-China axis. So if in case we see UK-US together, and US being a more powerful player in UK-US dynamics, then we have to see that UK has to play very cautiously the unfolding of the dynamics which is going to happen. But then the situation is very important, and the ball is in China's court right now, that how far they maintain. There has been a tendency among Chinese to be assertive, and a kind of reaction that they have been showing. Say, even if we talk about Tibetan border and Indian skirmishes that are happening on the Ladakh in the Ladakh region. So how do we see that China observes a restraint in terms of asserting itself too far, because the situation is very precarious? It should not give the rest of the powers a chance to coalesce against China. So that is, critical for all the powers together, at the same time individually as well.
Okay, all right. Let me bring in another aspect into all of this, Ambassador. Is this just rhetoric and posturing at the end of the day? Because let's not forget, Chinese are being aggressive, so are the US, the UK too now taking an aggressive stand. Is all of this being done to deflect the domestic pressure?
I think it is part of an exercise to show strength to the domestic lobbies also within China, or to their population. But I wouldn't say that this is all empty rhetoric, because I think clearly there's too much of it going on for it to be only rhetoric. And I think sort of the proof of the pudding will really be what actually happens on the Hong Kong security law. So I think it is not rhetoric purely on part of China, and nor is it simply empty words on the part of the rest of the world, because I think even if we cut out the specifics of 3 million or not 3 million, I think it is undeniable that most countries are showing that they are upset with China. It is also undeniable that most countries are looking to regain some amount of economic sovereignty from what they feel they lost to China. So in terms of shortening the supply lines, in terms of perhaps bringing them into their own country, or if not in their own country, at least diversifying the sources of materials. Most countries have come up short in terms of drugs, equipment, basics, raw materials, because so much of it has been outsourced to China in different ways. So I think in all these ways, there is a real move to change the situation on the ground. And I think there is also a fear of a technological invasions of China. That too much of the breaking new areas of technology have been stolen by China or are being invested in by China. So I think nations are trying to regain control to some amount of their economic sovereignty in the days to come. So that to that extent, I think we will see a real change. Where this balance settles, of course, will be the future will tell us.
Absolutely. Talking about the tech aspect now, Elizabeth Broad, there is this whole 5G issue. How serious is this, a problem is this between China and the UK?
Well, it's a radical shift if it does happen, as seems to be the case. So it was just this January that the UK government announced that it would go with Huawei. And that, we have to remember, was against the extremely vocal opposition of the US, not just the Trump administration, but bipartisan opposition in the US against this move. But the UK did it anyway, and it tried to soften the message by saying, it would just be up to 35% of the kit and only in non-sensitive areas, but still it went with Huawei when Huawei was already emerging as a major security threat, and it was being hotly discussed, and other Five Eyes countries had already decided not to go with Huawei, and yet the UK did it. So to now change course and say, oh no, we're not going to do it after all, that will of course embarrass the UK. Well, I guess that's acceptable, but it will also invoke the wrath of not just Huawei, but the Chinese government, which had been supporting and pushing for Huawei, even though it says it's a private company, it had been lobbying for Huawei in lots of countries. So this is a fight the UK government will have to take now. And again, having left the EU, the UK is very exposed to Chinese pressure and threats.
Absolutely. All right. Let's bring in another issue into the picture as well. Sheetal, as far as other democracies are concerned, you also spoke about it in one of your remarks, where you said, post-Brexit, of course, there's that tension and friction between the rest of Europe and the UK. So how much can the UK depend or count on the other European nations as far as taking on China is concerned?
Frank,
Sheetal, go ahead.
My opinion is that UK would still be more close to the European Union, and European Union countries would be more aligning with the UK. There are a couple of reasons for it. Because China, in the past, say, 2 decades, and particularly in the last decade and more so in the last 5 years, we say, has been pushing its economic strength over the rest of the world through BRI, Road, and all these initiatives. However, the smaller countries have started to realize that there is something fishy behind these kind of cooperations and collaborations, and then the kind of checkbook diplomacy, and then that debt trap and all those things. The one thing that we can talk about the European Union is 16+1. That was the East European countries, Central and Eastern European countries, and China. The kind of the cooperation that these countries had, but then the Central and Eastern European countries have become cautious of the fact that this is a kind of different different ball game together. So they have understood the game plan, and they have started distanciating themselves from China. So one, if given a chance of having an option whom to go with, they will certainly ally with the European Union, both of them, EU with UK and UK with the EU. And at the same time, all of them are in the broader ambit of US diplomacy, and then there's a gravitation towards the West rather than China. Yes, the path that China has chosen, if in case its deeds were not very fishy and the kind of thing which has happened because of coronavirus, it could have become an economic giant over a period of time had not it been very aggressive and manipulative in its the ways in which it was connecting to the world. But at this point of time, what China has done, its trust level has nosedived. And the second thing, that the entire effort to become a power, which has two components, one is of a hard power and one is of a soft power, both are now going against China. The reason being that US for a long period of time is not just a hard power, it has also been a soft power. It is attracting intelligent people, talents, a multicultural, diverse setting, which is offering people to come and realize their potential and all other things which are part and parcel of liberal societies, which are respecting rights and all. But of course, there are problems with that. But in general, we talk about US as an open society. Now, if given a chance, if you and me have to send our kids to study and realize their potential, will we ever think of sending them to China? China happens to rank 30th on the soft power index. And that is why this entire fight, either to become a military power or to become a soft power, China has lost advantage in both the cases. It could have gained in the economic sense, but that too has become a point of contention, and people have started suspecting its intentions. And that is why China, of course, may have for a short period of time, may have won the situation by supplying kits and all these things to the world. But at the same time, it has also ossified the suspicion that people had towards it. And the more passing time, we'll see that this suspicion would grow stronger and stronger. People, of course, will continue to cooperate on the economic reasons, but then the trust element has gone between the two.
All right. I've got time to get one last comment in on the program. So, Ambassador, close the show for us with your concluding remarks for the best way forward.
Well, I think we are in for an interesting time as far as China and the rest of the world is concerned. And we are going to see the kind of confrontation you're seeing in the UK on several other fronts. I think ultimately somewhere this will have to be balanced off, because we forget that confrontation will not take us all the way. For instance, India and China are very strong neighbors, and confrontation doesn't work. They're very critical neighbors. Similarly with the UK, which we have been discussing, I'll just end with one point, that if UK has to recover its economy, it also needs a lot of investment. And soon you will be seeing that sort of argument coming, that are we going to be losing the China investment? Similarly in Europe, less so perhaps in the United States. And I think there's one more aspect with the UK particularly, which we weren't able to touch on. It's going to be hosting the environment negotiations, the COP26 in Glasgow next year, and for which China's participation and successful participation is going to be absolutely critical. So somewhere along this confrontation, there will be efforts made to sort of balance it off after initial points have been made. But I think, as far I agree with the other panelists, that in different ways China has lost a large part of the momentum it had built up as a rising power, both in its political expansionism, its BRI policy, its economic heft. And I think what is going to be the remarkable point when we look back on 2020 after some time, hopefully, will be the immense loss of faith in China as a partner, which we will see the world over.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that what we are seeing really as far as China and the rest of the world is concerned is not just rhetoric and posturing. The UK-China tensions are part of a bigger global dynamic and also For the time being, it seems like China on one side and the rest of the world on the other. And China certainly seems to have lost the momentum that it has gained over the last few years, is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.